Chapter 11. Jack, take the boy upstairs. Mary Frances, you and Louisa wait down here. Pastor Carl ordered. George'll be back in a minute. The man picked Jamey up and carried him out of the kitchen and up the stairs. Jamey could vaguely hear his mother murmuring, "This is for your own good. We're saving you, son." He could still hear her crying when Jack set him down. On the floor in his bedroom. "Get down on your knees, boy, and start praying to the Lord." Jack shoved Jamey down. Jack tried to stop the orange and white cat from scurrying inside, but it was too fast. The man moved toward it, but the cat hissed and bared its teeth. He left the room muttering, "Sodomite, sodomite, sinner, repent," and slammed the door shut. Jamey heard him turn the lock. Never locked from the outside before. He wondered if his father had had the lock installed, hoping for just this occasion. He sat on his bed and looked warily around the room, stroking Orange, who had jumped on his lap. His room looked like it had the last time he'd been home, to gather his things, to leave, as his dad had stood implacable in the doorway, saying over and over that no godforsaken, unrepentant homosexual would sleep under his roof. That had been back in the summer. Had it really been 5 months ago? Nothing had changed. Nothing had been touched, nothing moved. His seashell and dragon collection still graced the top of his bookshelves and his desk. The big purple ceramic dragon, with its wide wings, that Franklin had given him for his 16th birthday, led the reptilian herd that crawled over a scattering of paperback novels. Looking at it, he wondered, and not for the first time, if maybe Franklin was gay but couldn't deal with it. Jamey's typewriter sat in the middle of his desk, flanked by his books, notebooks, and binders. Franklin had teased him that he was too neat. Jamey wondered what Henry would say about his bedroom, if he ever got the chance to share it with him. "I want to show him my room. I love him. I love him." "I love you, Henry," Jamey said out loud. Orange pushed his head into Jamey's chest. Purring loudly, he dropped down and started kneading Jamey's stomach. "I missed you too, big guy. I love him." There, he had said it out loud a second time, even if there was no one there to hear it but him and Orange. If only Henry had been able to hear it. He wished Henry were near enough he could reach out and touch him, even though he wasn't sure he was brave enough to say "I love Henry" out loud one more time, in front of all these people. Jamey'd wanted to show Henry the place that had been his sanctuary, his hiding place all through high school. This was where he would go to masturbate to fantasies of kissing and undressing Franklin. The door locked, checked twice, 3, 4 times. Here, Jamey had read the books on homosexuality he had been brave enough to check out of the public library. That had taken weeks and several recon missions to be sure the circulation desk clerk on duty was a total stranger. He'd prayed here to be free of his grievous sin, asking God to cut it out of him as if it were a tumor. Someone unlocked the door. Jamey looked up to see Pastor Carl in the doorway. Behind him, the prayer team and his parents. One by one they came into the bedroom. The 4 men in the prayer team began to tape poster board signs to his bedroom walls. Leviticus 18 verse 22 and 2013. Romans 1:26, 2:1 and 1. Corinthians 6. 9-11, 1 Timothy 1 verse 10. Genesis 19. Sodom and Gomorrah. The last sign displayed the word repent, over and over and over again. Orange hissed and ran under the bed. Jamey had known these men in the prayer team all his life. They were good men. They did good things, they did good. Jack, devoted to his elderly parents, visited them every other day, just checking just to be sure. Eddie could be counted on to cook and clean up at the homeless shelter once a week, regular as clockwork, and if anyone needed a ride to church or to the store, if he could, he would. For Marvin and Elias, similar long lists of good deeds. They were all of them good men. The 4 of them had always been good to him and his family. They always asked about him. How was he doing? How was school? How were his folks, his grandparents? Did he need a ride? Pastor Carl was a good man, and his parents were good people, and they loved him and were proud of him. This aberration, the boy his dad had caught him kissing at VCU, and now Henry. They were thinking it would pass with the help of their fervent prayers. He would turn from the unnatural to the natural, from the false and sinful to the true and godly. If these good people were standing here in his bedroom, and they had come to help him, to save him, could they be right? Could he be wrong? But I love him. I love Henry. That was true, and Jamey had never been surer of anything, even. So it could be wrong. The devil was the archdeceiver, the beguiler, and the seducer. People were led into sin by beautiful things and other people all the time, weren't they? All these good people believed loving Henry was a grievous sin. But hadn't he told his mother a few days ago that he loved Henry and didn't care if he went to hell? Jamey didn't know what to do or say or believe. If his magic was gone, maybe God had taken it away? He sat, his head bowed, and let Pastor Carl lay hands on him, and he let the pastor pray, his words washing over him, a relentless shower of syllables, vowels, consonants. They prayed over him in relays for the rest of the morning. They let him go to the bathroom twice, eat 1 apple and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and drink a bottle of orange juice his mother brought up and passed inside. And the prayers continued until sundown, this time with 3 more bathroom breaks. Another apple, a banana, more orange juice, a pimento cheese sandwich. When he finally said he repented, they shouted hosannas again and again until there was one last prayer, with Pastor Carl laying his hand on Jamey's head. You're saved, hold on to that. Hold on to your repentance. Sin no more. Praise the Lord. Jamey spent the night alone and hungry, to reflect, the pastor said, on his sins and his salvation, to gather his strength against backsliding. He had only said he repented to get them to stop. This wasn't love. Jamey knew. That wasn't completely true. His parents loved him. Casey and Maddie loved him. Aunt Louisa loved him. His parents were good people. They did good things. His mother visited shut-ins and she did shopping for them. She made casseroles and cakes and pies whenever there was a sickness, a death. His dad fixed cars for people who had no money. He mowed yards and dug up weeds for old men and ladies with gnarled arthritic hands. Just like the prayer team. Just like Pastor Carl. But I do love him and he loves me. Jamey whispered into the dark, into the quiet of the room. The words seemed so small compared to the words in love of his parents, the church, and all the good people there. Jamey had loved going to church, or had, until his father had kicked him out of the house, yelling, "You're no son of mine," as he'd loaded his car. Singing the hymns he knew so many by heart was a pleasure. Reading the Bible stories, the family night suppers, the huge homecoming picnic every September, the tables heavy with food, fried chicken, baked chicken, platters of sliced ham and roast beef, deviled eggs, and more deviled eggs, banana pudding, pound cakes, chess pies, bowls and bowls of salads, ham biscuits, pecan pies. It's not a sin. Those whispered words were very small compared to the ones surrounding him on the wall, on the posters taped to the wall. Every word that had been said around and over him, every word that had washed over him all day long, and all the memories, those words were bigger and louder. Loving Henry was a sin. A man loving another man, a woman loving another woman, sinners committing sins. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. I did say I repented, Orange, but I didn't mean it. Jamey stroked the cat. His repentance wasn't sincere, or was it? Henry wasn't the first boy for whom he had feelings. The first time he had a crush on a boy was in 9th grade. Donnie was beautiful, and Jamey had loved to hear him laugh. There had only been furtive looks, but Jamey had realized the way he felt about Donnie was different. Franklin had been next. They had met in 10th grade, then Bennett, and now Henry. His feelings, wanting to hug and kiss Franklin, all of it was wrong. The preacher said so. His parents said so. The world said so. Maybe he did mean it when he had said he repented. But I love him. I need him. Even with Orange snuggled up against him, Jamey had never felt more alone in his life. Jamey woke up Tuesday morning to hear the faint sounds of his mother downstairs. She was in the kitchen cooking him breakfast. The smell of frying bacon made his mouth water. He wished he wasn't hungry, he wished he could refuse to eat it. But that would only upset her. Feeding her children was loving them. Would she call Pastor Carl and the prayer team back for another round of prayer relays and chanting, calls for the demons of sodomy to be gone? If he told his mother about his dreams, would she call them back? We are on the beach in Coverack. A wind blowing in from the Atlantic whips the surf into a froth. Henry is a wolf and we're playing frisbee. I toss the disc, and he leaps into the air and catches it and comes running up to me, dropping it at my feet, and he licks my face and he jumps up on me, that big black wolf, and we fall down together into the grass, and we are not on that beach. but in a grassy yard, a place I know but can't remember, and we fall, both of us naked, and I feel his hardness against mine, and he touches me, and I touch him, hands all over each other, and that dream wasn't the kind of dream had by people who truly repented. Or had that dream come from the devil? Was jumping from the devil too? How could someone tell what was from the devil and what was not? He knew what his parents and the Reverend would say. Matthew 7 verse 16, by their fruits you will know them. Do you gather grapes from thorns or figs from thistles? His mother was coming up. He heard her singing a hymn. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. He sat on the bed, humming the tune, and waited as she fiddled with the lock his father had put on the door for just this purpose, praying as he put in each screw. So he had explained to Jamey yesterday. Jamey watched as she pushed the door open, came in, and set down the tray on his desk. Scrambled eggs, bacon, wheat toast, and strawberry preserves. Orange juice and coffee that was half milk. One of his favorite breakfasts, of course, just like peanut butter and jelly and grilled pimento cheese were his favorites. Banana pancakes and maple syrup and bacon would be tomorrow's breakfast. Jamey closed his eyes. Henry the boy, his body, my body, Henry. He opened his eyes. He was still in his bedroom, his parents captive. Captive. Henry has never tried to hold me, physically or emotionally, against my will. Henry had been, Jamey realized, extraordinarily patient with him. His mother was singing another hymn. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, as she arranged the food on his desk. Orange raised his head from where he had been sleeping on the corner of the bed, stood and stretched, and after rubbing against Jamey, jumped off and wandered out of the room. Orange always eats downstairs. I thought it would be easier. Well, Pastor Carl said you might go running after that. His mother stopped as if she had run out of words. After Henry? She shuddered at the sound of his name. Come eat, darling. Here you come and eat, and I'll go get some coffee and sit with you. I've missed you, Jamey. You've no idea how much. I don't want to hurt her. But he already had, hadn't he? When he told her that he loved Henry and that he would love him whether or not he went to hell for. Had that made her sick? Broken her heart? Didn't he owe her and owe his father for all that they had done for him? What do I owe Henry? Maybe that was the wrong question. Now eat, sweetheart. His mother came back into his bedroom, coffee in hand. He was hungry. There was no point in starving himself, not really. It wouldn't get him out of here, his bedroom, his parents' house, the threat of the prayer team's return. Their clutches, used the right word. He couldn't escape. His magic wasn't working. Maybe it's gone. Maybe all of that, the big quest, the magical explosion, those watchers, is over. Petered out. Maybe the watchers, the bad guys, won. Eat, sweetheart. Go on. You'll feel better. Jamey sat at his desk and ate. His mother kept talking about Casey and Maddie going to stay with Aunt Louisa and Uncle Mark until after the Thanksgiving service. They weren't happy about it. They wanted to be with their big brother, but there was going to be a huge feast after the rebaptism on Thanksgiving, and Jamey looked up, coffee cup in hand. Rebaptism? You want me to do that? Jamey, you repented. That has to be acknowledged before God and man, and celebrated. What was lost is found. Pastor Carl says the saved, again, must declare it publicly, so the day after tomorrow on Thanksgiving, you'll be rebaptized. We'll all be there and we'll celebrate. It will be real giving of thanks, of praising God and Jesus. He stared. She looked transfigured, as if her entire body had been saturated with joy. You really want me to do this, don't you, Mama? Oh yes, yes, yes. You were lost, now you're found. You've repented, you've been saved again. God is merciful. Jamey, we not only want you to do this, you must do it. His father stood in the doorway. I've been praying so hard ever since this summer when I walked in on you and that other boy in Richmond. You've been saved from hell. I sent that Henry away and now you're free of him. Jamey closed his eyes. I'm holding Henry's naked body against my. The magic didn't work. When Jamey closed his eyes, nothing happened. Nothing is going to happen. It doesn't work. It's not going to work anymore. It's not real. But I love him. Loving him is wrong. It's more than wrong, it's evil. It's from the devil. But it doesn't feel wrong or evil. That's the devil tricking me. Jamey sat on his bed, his father on his left and his mother on his right. They each held one of his hands. They closed their eyes and prayed their words. Gentle, kind, heavy with love. I miss them. I miss this. Choosing Henry means giving up them and everything that's a part of them. Jamey closed his eyes. He didn't see or hear Orange come back in and run across the room to the window that looked out into the backyard. The cat jumped onto the windowsill and thumped his paws on the glass, chattering. The raven perched on the thin ledge on the other side of the glass ignored the cat. The senior watcher took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, his claws barely extended. He didn't need glasses when he was transformed into his watcher form, but here in his human persona's office, appearances had to be maintained. He didn't want to intervene. He wanted to let Ella and those she had awakened finish the task, eliminate those who had violated disclosure, the werewolf and the godling boy and the witch. He looked at Ella as she finished her report. She had assumed her human face while the rest of her watcher body was hidden beneath clothes. Long black gloves graced her hands and arms, giving her the air of an old movie star. Her wings and tail were retracted. Boots hid her elongated, clawed feet. She looked normal if eccentric. People saw what they could understand. The godling has been taken back in by his family? Ella nodded. We tracked him there. His parents want to save him from his sexuality. They've called in their religious practitioner, their pastor. I've had one of my lieutenants who attends that church in her human persona investigate. And today's Wednesday. The godling is to be rebaptized tomorrow at their Thanksgiving service. I estimate the chances of a rescue attempt by the witches to be very high. They believe Loki's key is to be found because of these two boys, that only they can find the key, and I am sure the witches who have personally helped them want a rescue from this church in particular. Ella said, for once I agree with them. I do not understand why their sexuality matters. Humans can be hard to understand. Can we use this? The senior watcher asked. We have already disclosed at the church in Richmond and we covered it up. We did the memory erasure at Larkin's, but there are too many who would attend this church to make that practical. Our tactics have created an atmosphere of fear, which is good, and they have conjured explanations as we expected. Your recommendation. The rationalizations to explain the magical often go unquestioned except by those deemed to be lunatics, conspiracy theorists, and the like. If we attack during this service and eliminate them, our watcher forms will be explained as something sent by the devil, by Satan. But you've seen the news. Ella proceeded to review what had been reported from Central and Northern Virginia. 3 I-95 bridges in central Richmond were closed this morning when fires erupted on all three. Traffic backed up for miles. Drivers should take 295. Around the city, Colonial Beach, customers and staff at Wilkerson's restaurant reported what was described as a river monster. A man and woman found on the roof of the VCU library claimed they floated up. A green man was reportedly seen in the Churchill neighborhood. Another river monster in the Potomac. The senior watcher waved his hand in dismissal. The magic eruption we expected. All of that will blow over or be labeled news of the strange or wind up on some television program no one takes seriously. I'm not wearing shoes anymore, Dr. M. No point in it. There's not much point in anything. Henry's voice was gray. I might as well go back to Richmond and try to join what's left of that pack on William Island, if they'll have me. Or find another one somewhere. They were in the Fredericksburg safe house, which to Henry's surprise was just up the street from the Currys. Dr. M and Bonnie had been seriously annoyed at how poorly the house's keeper had taken care of the place. Dust was everywhere. Cobwebs adorned the corners, and some of the food in the refrigerator had turned into science experiments. Bonnie planned to loudly complain to the local coven about how unwelcoming the house was and why wasn't the keeper on duty? At least they'd been able to scrounge a pair of jeans a little too big and a sweatshirt for Henry. Bonnie and her animals were downstairs putting together a meal out of what had been left in the pantry. You'd hate it. Jamey is your pack, not that crew. Dr. M, he's not coming back. He believes what they're telling him about God and sodomy and sin and all that, Henry muttered, pushing himself against the wall of the tiny upstairs room. A bed, a nightstand, a lamp. The bathroom was down the hall. More like a monk's cell than a bedroom, and two people would be hard-pressed to squeeze into the narrow bed. Jamey's sword lay beside him. His battered and ripped, now useless backpack was on the floor where Henry had dropped it when Dr. M had knocked. That he'd wrapped his face in it, breathing in what was left of Jamey's scent he wanted to keep to himself. Henry's raven, perched on the headboard, apparently sleeping. You don't know that. He said he loved you, remember? She said. Take my hand, Henry. He took her hand. She jumped back, wincing. What happened? I didn't, Dr. M. I was afraid of this. You shocked me, and it wasn't static electricity either. Let me explain. You two are pack mates, a pack of two, and you've bonded. You're connected. When you're not, it's like a misfire. He can't jump without touching you, not yet anyway. He couldn't get the two of you out of that house, and now he can't get himself out of the house. It has nothing to do with not wanting to be with you. I'm certain he doesn't know he needs to be in direct physical contact. But he jumped out of the 7-Eleven. Wait. I just touched him. So that's what happened at his house. You need to touch each other, and based on what your raven told us, you need to be there in that church tomorrow and rescue him, remind him of who he is and the person he loves. Maybe his sword will help too. Get it back to him. She touched its blade. The raven woke up then. Pruck, pruck, pruck. For a long moment Henry said nothing. He just stared at her, then looked away and out the tiny window and back. Pruck, pruck. I can do that. Henry turned to the raven. Bartram, I know I won't be alone. And you too, right, Dr. M? He finally told you his name? Glorious raven, indeed. I know you can do this tomorrow, but it will be dangerous. If we figured it out, the Watchers did as well. Mind you, the people at the church want this ceremony to go off without any problems. She hesitated. It might be best if it was just you and Bartram. One person can hide in a crowd more easily than two or three, and you can hide in your shadow, remember? But I'll be nearby, just outside. And Bonnie and any other witches I can get to help. With a quick flutter, the raven jumped from the headboard to sit on Henry's lap. Bartram is just one of his names. Henry stroked the bird's head and looked up at Dr. M, a half-smile on his face. Yeah, my shadow, of course. I wasn't thinking. I have to do this. He looked down at his hands and back at her. And I want to do this. I love him, I miss him, and I need him, Dr. M. I really need him. I know. Believe me, I know. He needs you too. Here's one more thing. She took his hand and squeezed. There was a quick pop of energy as the tiny cloud from the witch in the wood passed from her hand into Henry's. What is this? Henry turned his hand back and forth, seeing the cloud below. His skin a faint glow. It feels pretty weird. I don't know. I've tried to find out, but I can't. My grandmother's grandmother said to give it to you and that you would know when the time comes. Henry held up his right hand, watching the glow of the tiny cloud. Dear Amma, I'm not doing this to set all the pets and witches free. I'm not doing this to bring back magic and restore the world and all that stuff y'all keep talking about. I'm doing this because I love Jamey and I want to be with him. I'll do my best, but I wanted you to know that's why I'm doing this. I know, she said. Chapter 13. No one spoke until they were standing on the sidewalk in front of the safe house. Henry could smell Jamey's grief. The two of them would talk about Jamey's parents and what his mother had said and done, but some time had to pass. First, how much time would be up to Jamey? Loki's lock. It's open. I felt it. I did too. Every magical being in the church and all around here did, Dr. M said. Let's go inside, get some tea, and we can talk about it, about everything. Once they were cleaned up and had cups of tea in hand and cookies on the table, Kathleen began. When that key turned for the fourth time, witches felt it. I sure did, right? There in that bedroom. For some magicals, it would actually be like sparks and light flickering under the skin. Then it rushed out, to be carried off by the wind or absorbed into whatever is around us, like wood or bricks or concrete. Jamey and Henry looked at each other. They definitely remembered the tingling. Any godlings nearby would feel it. In fact, Jamey, your mother probably felt a tingling under her skin. Jamey wished he could ask her if she had. What about the pets? Henry asked. The words would spontaneously shift, Kathleen explained. I didn't. You did, actually. You flickered, and I saw the fur rippling. You had to protect Jamey, so you controlled it. The others would flicker back and forth, from human to animal, probably too fast for anybody to notice, even if they wind up naked or furred. I suspect that nobody at the church will be in any shape to understand it or believe it. How do you know all this? Henry was glad to hear his voice wasn't as gray as he thought it would be. Kathleen smiled wearily. Secret keepers pass the knowledge down generation after generation. What about everyone else, the mundanes? Jamey asked. The police and the paramedics are at the church taking care of the carnage. The watchers left behind. But what has been released cannot be called back. Evil or good, and magic will spread from wherever you two have been. It will be slow at first, then gain momentum. She closed her eyes, exhaustion visible in her face. Maybe we should try and get some rest if we can. 3 days later, the head of the Greater Richmond Council of Covens called Kathleen to tell her they had bought a new safe house in the far West End, and to ask if she would be keeper. Henry was relieved to hear her say yes, but only if the boys came with her, and the animals, of course. He had started to worry where he, Jamey, Orange, and Bartram were going to live, never mind what they were going to do. So that had been settled, at least for now. They bought adjoining townhouses on a lake in Harbour Cove off Lauderdale, near Short Pump, and the Larkins where you two met. One of the previous owners was well less than tidy. We'll need to do a lot of cleaning and painting, she told them. Henry hoped cleaning and painting would help Jamey manage his grief over his family, and Dr. M too, over losing Ronan. There are a lot of reports out there, a few sort of funny, like NPR calling it an epidemic of the weird, but some are pretty serious. A reporter compared it to a 4th of July gone wrong, with firecrackers and rockets exploding unexpectedly and electricity going on and off all over the place. Jamey announced at breakfast in the new safe house. I just heard this story on the radio upstairs about a woman calling 911 because she saw a green woman and a pan near her house out in California. Somewhere, Henry reported from inside the fridge where he was retrieving the orange juice. 911 hung up on her until they got 5 more calls like hers. On December 19th, the far West End safe house clean and decorations up for Yule and Christmas. Dr. M and the boys sat down that evening to listen to the president. The president and the first lady have asked to address the nation from the Oval Office. The president: my fellow Americans, the events of the past 4 weeks, which seem to defy logical explanation, have been disturbing and frightening for many. The country's leading scientists are studying all possible causes for the many strange things that have happened here in the United States and around the world. The return of magic has been suggested by some, and until yesterday I would have dismissed that myself. But I have, and yes, I was not expecting to say this, learned otherwise. I'll let the First Lady explain. The First Lady: I understand that many of you are frightened by what has happened, but I want to assure you that the return of magic is nothing to fear. Why do I know this? Because I am a witch. So are my 3 sons. So are many of you, and I suspect that, as I have done, you are now revealing this to your husbands, wives, and partners, to your children, to your friends. Magic has returned, and I assure you it is a cause for celebration. Chapter 14. Late December. The red cloud spread so thin it was almost a whisper, drifted on the wind a long time. It followed the barest of scents and an old memory, until finally it found what it had been seeking. The caves. It paused just outside the dark of the cave mouth, could smell the others. Inside their cocoons. Like her, they were no longer watchers, but she didn't know what she was. The rogue was here, but Ella was too tired to do more than to note its existence. She drifted inside the cave, into the welcoming darkness, to the cocoon, waiting for her. Yule, December 20th. As the far West End safe house filled up with witches, Henry wished he could pull his shadow around him, or better, slip outside as Wolf and go running by the lake in its glittering thin layer of ice. But this was home now. The witches and the bright streamers and floating lights would be gone in a few hours, and Henry would still be here, and Jamey, Dr. M, the raven, Orange, and Bonnie's big gray and white cat. Dr. M was standing across the room talking animatedly to someone from the university. Henry leaned in their direction and listened. Come back to Longwood to chair the new Wiccan Studies program. Dr. M caught his eye, frowned, and shook her head slightly. Sorry, Dr. M. I know I'm not supposed to eavesdrop. There were no reporters here, and that was a good thing. Dr. M, as the unofficial spokesperson of the Council of Covens for Greater Richmond, had been interviewed by BBC America, CNN, NPR, The Times-Dispatch, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and The London Times. press conference was scheduled for Christmas Eve with what seemed like every television station and newspaper up and down the East Coast and Canada as well. Wisely, Dr. M only told them part of the story. Henry was glad she'd kept secret his and Jamey's part in what had happened. When you're ready, we'll let people know. But don't be surprised if one of the magicals figures it out before that and talks. 5 weeks had passed since the end of the world. At least the end of the world, as everyone had known and imagined it to be. Since then they had buried and burned the dead, cleaned and painted and cut a door between the original two houses, turning them into one, and watched as magic spread around the world. And what was hidden became visible to all. The world appeared to be in something akin to a state of shock. Dr. M had told them it wouldn't last. Mundanes didn't usually accept this kind of major change easily, and in many parts of the world had actively resisted it, fought it, tried to kill it. Things had been relatively easier in North America, Britain, Ireland, and Iceland, places where the release had begun. But even so, she had said, the days were temporary. That the First Lady had come out as a witch, along with their 3 sons, had helped in the United States. For now, despite the festive mood of the holiday season, Henry could sense and smell tension and fear in the room. The witches knew that after the shock wore off, there would be hunts, stakings, burnings, and worse. Love charms would not be sold in the local CVS and Walgreens, no matter what the First Lady had said. Not for a long time. Religious leaders thundered in their pulpits against the pagan, the ungodly, the evil, and told their congregations again and again that Jesus would never countenance this. Exodus 20 verse 18, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," was being quoted endlessly. That this was a mistranslation and should read, "Thou shalt not suffer an evil sorceress or woman who does evil magic," was also cited endlessly. It had been pointed out Jesus wasn't the source of the Exodus passage. Some prayed for love, understanding, and acceptance. It was time to do, they said, what Jesus would do. A few had gone so far as to suggest that Jesus might have been a godling himself. Henry sniffed around for Jamey and found him across the room, standing beneath a garland of witch lights and looking at the lake. Henry gently shoved his way through the crowd, knowing Jamey would sense him coming before he got there. "I called home again today," Jamey said after they had stood there for a while. "Oh, Jamey." Henry put his arm around him and kissed him. He had known something was wrong by how Jamey smelled. "What happened?" Jamey shrugged. After Henry had told Jamey what his father had said to him in the backyard, how much he loved him, Jamey had called home 2 times since Thanksgiving. The first time, a week after the holiday, his dad had answered, "Daddy, it's Jamey. Please just listen. I love you. I love all of you." There had been a long pause, and he had heard his father breathing, then clearing his throat before he spoke. "I don't want things to be like this. Jamey, repent. Come home. I love you too. This is not how God meant you to be. Turn away from the devil. Renounce that boy. Daddy, I know you love me. God made me this way and I can't repent for loving Henry. You're going to hell. Daddy, I know you don't really. I have only one son. Don't call here again, unless you are truly ready to repent." His father hung up. The second time he had called, a week later, his mother had answered the phone. "Mama? It's me, Ja. Click. May. I just called again. Right before the party started. I didn't tell anybody. Feel stupid for doing it. I know you both told me not to." Jamey looked down at his hands. "What happened this time?" Henry squeezed Jamey against him. "Casey answered, and I managed to tell him I loved him and Maddie and I missed them. Then Daddy grabbed the phone." "What did he say?" "Never call here again." "I just stood there saying hello? Hello? Daddy?" So, the dial tone. Jamey started crying. Henry pulled Jamey into a hug and held him, stroking his hair. "Come on, let's go upstairs," he whispered. "But the party. They can get along without us." Henry made sure to wave at Dr. M and gesture upstairs, and after her nod and puzzled look, shepherded Jamey through the crowd, his hand on Jamey's back. They nodded and smiled as they went. Henry was amazed at how bright and wild some of the witches had dressed. Almost half of them had come in costume. 2 women, who had come as warriors, stopped them to thank them. 2 men dressed as the planets Saturn and Jupiter echoed the women. Henry hoped Jamey noticed how many same-sex couples had come. He made sure to snag 2 mugs of hot cider, then took Jamey upstairs. Once in their bedroom, Henry told him to lie down and, after setting the fragrant mugs on the nightstand, sat beside Jamey and slowly rubbed his back. "How do you feel?" Henry finally asked. "Sad, and yeah, I'm angry," he said, his voice muffled by the pillow. "I'm angry." It was the first time he'd been able to admit that. Henry lay down beside him and pulled Jamey against him. Jamey kept talking. "I was thinking about jumping home on Christmas Day, but I can't without you. And even if we did, that would just be more misery and grief, and Daddy might try to hurt you. Probably not a good idea. I wish I didn't miss them. I tried to hate them, I can't. But they want me to give you up and I can't. I'd be giving up myself. I just want to yell and scream at them." Henry very gently rolled Jamey over so that they were facing each other. He stroked his face, his red hair, and kissed him. "I love you." "I know. I love you too." Tuesday, December 29th. Henry woke before Jamey and for a while just lay there. It was his turn to cook, well, his turn for a cooking lesson from Dr. M. Waffles she had promised would be easy. On Christmas the three of them had exchanged simple gifts. Henry and Jamey, who had no money, gave Dr. M 2 coupons they'd drawn and colored like little kids' drawings. The first, for a full-course meal, complete with full cleanup, to be redeemed when she ordained they had graduated from Dr. M's culinary school. The second, a trip to the British Museum without demons this time. The coupon read. Jamey gave Henry a trip back to the beach, this time in a warm place. With the help of one of their witch friends, Henry had created a staff polishing concoction of lemon and olive oil with lemon juice for Kathleen and a sword cleaning kit for Jamey. Jamey also found a brush for the wolf that could stand up to the coarse fur. Dr. M had renewed the protection spells on their pentacles and gave Henry a box of sweatshirts which made them all laugh. With tears in her eyes she gave Jamey spells to strengthen his sword. He hugged her tight, knowing they were all thinking about Ronan. 4 Orange and the big gray and white cat. There was a supply of gourmet cat food and new fur combs. Bartram received a sack of premium birdseed, which pleased him to no end. It had been a good day. Henry carefully eased himself out from under Jamey's arm, sat up, and stretched his arms, then his neck, his legs and feet. Wolf-silent he stood, and made sure the blanket covered Jamey, who hadn't been sleeping well lately. Very carefully he traced the scar on Jamey's face, from his ear to his chin, faint fading but still there. Dr. M said to give him time. Henry leaned down and kissed Jamey's forehead, then fished around on the floor for one of his new sweatshirts and a pair of jeans and carried them into the bathroom. He grinned, thinking that going to the bathroom would be a lot easier if he were Wolf outside. That is. Before leaving the bedroom, Henry kissed Jamey one more time. Jamey stirred, murmured something and half-turned, which woke Orange, who hissed at Henry and arched his back, his fur sticking up. "All right, cat, I hear ya, but I keep telling ya I am not going to hurt him. I love him," Henry whispered. "Damn cat doesn't care much for wolves." The first night after leaving Jamey's house, Orange had come pretty close to attacking Henry. Jamey had taken the snarling and hissing feline downstairs, not once, but twice. The third time Orange had yowled outside the bedroom door, Dr. M intervened, muttering a few sleep spells over the animal. When that didn't work right away, she restrained him with a light net and took the outraged beast downstairs. Things were getting better, but Orange still hissed at Henry. Bartram had taken to sleeping downstairs on a perch away from the cat. Their fight had been epic, feathers and fur everywhere. Henry closed the door behind him, ignoring Orange's baleful stare. "Listen, cat, I just want Jamey to be happy." He was amazed that after all that had happened, all the bad things that populated his nightmares, he was actually happy. He mourned with Jamey and Dr. M over the loss of Charlie and Bonnie, and a long list of others, but even so, he was happy. He just couldn't talk about how he felt. Saying it out loud might break the spell. Besides, Henry didn't quite believe he deserved to be happy. He was the boy who had spent most of his school years hiding inside his glamour, in the green and black shadows that were his camouflage. He was the unwanted foster child, the boy who wasn't smart enough to go to college. He was the boy whose father said he was a monster and who had tried to kill him, whose mother had abandoned him. Happiness clearly came with a price, just like magic. Happiness didn't necessarily relieve anger or create trust. Henry paused, his hand on the doorknob. He'd promised himself he wouldn't do this, but he couldn't help himself. He went back inside the room and walked around the bed and very gently touched Jamey one more time. Still there. He shook his finger at Orange. Still there. So were Dr. M and the other beasts. Henry wanted to stop the checking, the seemingly casual glances, the touches, but he couldn't. Not yet. He had been left behind before, and the little boy inside him was scared, happy or not. As for happiness, it had a tendency to be short-lived. Henry sighed and slid his hand down the wooden banister as he descended the stairs. He heard Dr. M in the kitchen and the raven prucking. Still there. He wondered what she would say if he told her he might want to find his parents someday to ask them why they had done what they had done. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe what he had was enough. I wake up beside Jamey every morning. I'm used to sleeping with him. I love him. He loves me. I have a home. I have a family. I have a partner. I belong. I'm happy. Even if he had to keep checking. Jamey woke to the touch of paws on his face and the smell of bacon. For a short moment he was at home in his bedroom. His parents would be downstairs. The dining room table would be set and ready for breakfast. Casey and Maddie would be in the basement feeding the animals or outside walking the dogs. And another touch from Orange and he found himself in the bed he shared with Henry, a bed with a very pleasant tangle of smells. Henry had assured him, the two of them, the cat, a touch of raven and sex. When Jamey opened his eyes, Orange's face was a few inches from his. He yawned and touched noses with the cat. That bacon smelled so good. Orange poked him again. His family was probably doing all the things he remembered, but instead of 5 place settings at the table there would be 4. He sighed and Orange bumped him again gently. All right. I'm up. Let me go to the bathroom and we'll go downstairs. You be nice to Henry, okay? Orange sniffed. With Orange purring against his chest, Jamey went downstairs into the warmth of the kitchen, the smells of maple syrup and coffee and warm waffles and bacon and Dr. M, along with the raven and Orange and the big gray and white cat and Henry, his family now. Henry. Epilogue. A light snow, a natural snow, was falling gently outside. It was almost midnight. Henry had been feeling a weighted moment coming, but he didn't tell anyone. Let the moment find me, he thought, tucked snugly in the safe house awaiting the turning of the year. Staying home is just fine. They had received a lot of invitations from all the local covens, even the big hotels, but this felt right and safe. Orange snored at Dr. M's feet, and the big gray and white cat, to her left, Bartram, was perched on the back of the chair nearby. Henry and Jamey were together on the floor, wrapped in an old quilt they had found in the attic. A fire, a natural fire, slowly burned down to glowing embers. The room was redolent with the aroma of the hot cider on the coffee table. It was the last day of the longest year of their lives. Should auld acquaintance be forgot, and never brought to mind? Should auld acquaintance be forgot, and auld lang syne? Dr. M sang softly. She raised her mug of hot cider toward the fireplace. To those we have loved and lost. Gunther, the calico, the inky black, and the Siamese. She paused, took a deep breath. To Bonnie and to Ronan. Henry heard the catch in her voice when she said his name. Here's to the new year. To Charlie, Jamey said quietly. To everyone who died trying to help us. Henry kissed Jamey on the cheek. Bartram prucked his own tribute. Somewhere nearby firecrackers went off. It was midnight. Happy New Year, everybody. Henry was echoed by Jamey and Kathleen. They sat quietly, watching the snow and the dying fire, and listening to firecrackers. On the other side of the lake 4 or 5 rockets went off, throwing red and green and yellow sparkles into the falling white. Dr. M took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and cleared her throat. That's done then, and given everything, it was done well. So that's it? Henry asked. Dr. M laughed. Not by a long shot, my dear wolf boy. Did I mention the rogue dragon in the great dismal swamp? She smiled at Henry and Jamey. Once upon a time, a werewolf and a godling fell in love. They had many adventures together.